The Clone Wars stretched across the galaxy, and every day was a battle. Anakin Skywalker and his Padawan, Ahsoka Tano, had fought side by side through countless missions. They had saved each other's lives more times than either could count. To the galaxy, they were master and apprentice. To their troops, they were leaders. But in the quiet moments between battles, something else had begun to stir. At first, it was simple closeness. Ahsoka had always admired Anakin's bravery, his defiance, his refusal to follow rules that made no sense. She found comfort in the way he trusted her, not just as a student, but as an equal. And Anakin felt something different when he looked at her. She wasn't like the other Jedi. She laughed, she teased, she questioned authority the way he did. She reminded him of himself, and yet she was something entirely her own. One night, after a mission, the two sat together on the steps of a ruined temple, waiting for their gunships. The moonlight caught the sharp angles of Ahsoka's face, and for a moment, Anakin felt his heart skip. He told himself it was nothing, just exhaustion, just the bond of war. But when she leaned closer, her voice soft with a rare vulnerability, he knew it was more. "Sky Guy," she said, her usual nickname laced with warmth instead of teasing. "Sometimes I wonder if we'll ever really get to live. Not just fight, not just survive." Anakin swallowed, his chest tightening. "I wonder the same thing, Snips, more than you know." Their eyes met. For a heartbeat, the galaxy vanished. There was no war, no Jedi code, no Padmé waiting back on Coruscant. Just the two of them, close enough to feel each other's breath. Anakin's hand twitched as though it wanted to reach for hers, but he forced it still. Yet Ahsoka noticed, and she didn't pull away. The gunships arrived before either could act, but the silence between them during the ride back was louder than any battle they had ever fought. Part 2. The line blurs. Over the weeks that followed, small moments began to change everything. Their training sessions lingered longer than necessary. Their laughter came too easily. Their glances held too long. Once, during a sparring match, Anakin caught Ahsoka's wrist and pulled her close. For a moment, their bodies were pressed together, their faces inches apart. She smirked, but her eyes burned with something more.
"Sky Guy," she said, her usual nickname laced with warmth instead of teasing. "Sometimes I wonder if we'll ever really get to live. Not just fight, not just survive." Anakin swallowed, his chest tightening. "I wonder the same thing, Snips. More than you know." Their eyes met. For a heartbeat, the galaxy vanished. There was no war, no Jedi code, no Padmé waiting back on Coruscant. Just the two of them, close enough to feel each other's breath. Anakin's hand twitched as though it wanted to reach for hers, but he forced it still. Yet Ahsoka noticed, and she didn't pull away. The gunships arrived before either could act, but the silence between them during the ride back was louder than any battle they had ever fought. Part 2. The line blurs. Over the weeks that followed, small moments began to change everything. Their training sessions lingered longer than necessary. Their laughter came too easily. Their glances held too long. Once, during a sparring match, Anakin caught Ahsoka's wrist and pulled her close. For a moment, their bodies were pressed together, their faces inches apart. She smirked, but her eyes burned with something more. "You're holding back, Master," she whispered. "And so are you," he replied, his voice low, almost daring. Neither moved for several seconds. The electricity between them was undeniable. Later that night, Anakin dreamed of Padmé's smile, but it was Ahsoka's eyes that lingered in his mind when he awoke. He told himself it was wrong. He told himself he loved Padmé, that he could never betray her. But every time Ahsoka brushed his hand, Every time she looked at him with trust and fire, his resolve weakened. And Ahsoka knew. She had seen the way his gaze lingered, the way his voice softened when he spoke to her alone. She felt the same pull, and though it terrified her, it thrilled her even more. The war never slowed, but between missions, the space between Anakin and Ahsoka grew hotter, heavier. Every shared glance burned. Every brush of fingers felt like a secret they couldn't admit. One night aboard their cruiser, after the troops had retired, Ahsoka found herself walking into the training room. She expected it to be empty, but there he was, Anakin, his saber humming as he practiced alone. Sweat clung to his skin, his chest rising and falling, every motion fluid and fierce. She leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, trying to keep her tone playful. "Can't sleep either." Anakin turned, his eyes catching hers. For a moment, his expression softened into something almost tender. "Too much on my mind." "Like what?" she asked, stepping closer. He hesitated. He wanted to say you. He wanted to admit that every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face, heard her voice. Instead, he forced a smirk. The usual Jedi business, or responsibility. But Ahsoka didn't believe him. She walked closer until she was standing right in front of him, so close she could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. She tilted her head, her voice dropping. "You're lying. I can always tell." Anakin's breath caught. The way she was looking at him, eyes sharp, lips curved in a daring little smile, was dangerous. He should have stepped back. Instead, he froze, drinking her in. Ahsoka reached out and touched his wrist, her fingers trailing lightly over his skin. The touch was innocent enough, but it sent a shock through him. His heart pounded. Her voice softened, husky with something unspoken. "You don't have to hide from me, Sky Guy." For a second, the room spun. The war, the code, Padmé, all of it blurred into the background. There was only her, warm and close, her presence wrapping around him like fire. Anakin leaned forward, just slightly, until their foreheads almost touched. His voice was a whisper, rough and low. "Ahsoka, this is dangerous." She smiled faintly, but her eyes glowed with heat. "So is everything we do." The air between them burned. He could feel her breath on his lips, her hand still resting on his skin, her body only inches away. His heart screamed at him to close the distance, to take what he wanted. His mind reminded him of Padmé, of vows, of consequences. In the end, he pulled away, but only barely. His chest heaved. His fists clenched as though holding himself back with every ounce of strength. "We can't," he said, though his voice trembled with longing. Ahsoka's gaze lingered on him, her smile fading into something more serious, more dangerous. "Maybe not. But you feel it too." And she was right. He did. The days passed, but the moment in the training room haunted them both. Anakin threw himself into battles more recklessly than usual. His mind clouded not only by visions of Padmé but by the image of Ahsoka's daring smile. Ahsoka, too, found herself restless, distracted, her thoughts wandering when they should have been on the mission. One night, after another exhausting victory, Ahsoka couldn't sleep. The hum of the cruiser was steady, but her mind buzzed with restless energy. She wandered the halls until she stopped outside his quarters. She hesitated. She knew this was dangerous, but before she could talk herself out of it, she pressed the panel. The door slid open, revealing Anakin seated at his desk, his face shadowed by the dim light. His eyes widened when he saw her. "Ahsoka, it's late." "I know," she whispered, stepping inside and letting the door slide shut behind her. "But I needed to see you." Her voice carried weight, a softness that made his chest tighten. He should have told her to leave. He should have stood up, set the line again. But instead, he just stared at her, every rational thought slipping away. Ahsoka stepped closer, her hands clasped in front of her as though holding herself back. "Anakin, ever since that night I can't stop thinking about it. About you." Her words hit him like a blade to the chest. He stood quickly, his breath heavy, his heart pounding in his ears. "You don't know what you're saying." But she did. And she wasn't afraid. She closed the space between them in 2 steps, lifting her chin to meet his gaze. "I know exactly what I'm saying." For a moment, they just stood there, breathing the same air, their eyes locked in a silent battle of want and restraint. Then Ahsoka's hand reached up, brushing against his chest. The touch was feather-light but sent fire through him. "Ahsoka!" His voice cracked, torn between warning and surrender. She tilted her head, her voice a husky whisper. "Tell me you don't feel it, and I'll walk away." But Anakin couldn't lie. Not now. Not with her so close, her touch burning against him. His hand rose, almost on its own, cupping her cheek. Her skin was warm beneath his palm, her eyes closing briefly at his touch. The galaxy held its breath. And then, against every vow, every rule, every warning in his mind, he kissed her. It was soft at first, hesitant, but it grew quickly, the dam breaking after too long held back. Her lips parted, her hands clutching at his tunic as though afraid he might vanish. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her closer, pressing her against him. The kiss was hungry, desperate, filled with every forbidden thought they tried to bury. When they finally pulled apart, their foreheads rested together, both gasping for air. "This is wrong," Anakin whispered, his voice hoarse. Ahsoka's lips curved into a faint, daring smile. "Then why does it feel so right?" His heart thundered. He knew she was right. He knew he couldn't walk away now. The line they'd drawn was gone. They had crossed it, and neither of them wanted to go back. The kiss had changed everything. For days after, neither Anakin nor Ahsoka could look at each other without remembering it. The heat of lips pressed together, the fire in their chests, the way the galaxy had disappeared in that stolen moment. They tried to continue as they had before. On the battlefield, they were still Commander Tano and General Skywalker, fighting side by side, shouting orders, saving lives. But when the blaster fire ceased and silence fell, the weight of what they had done pressed in on both of them. Anakin found himself restless. His nights spent pacing instead of sleeping. He loved Padmé, he told himself that again and again. She was his wife, his secret, his everything. But when he was with Ahsoka, it was different. She challenged him, matched him, understood him in a way no one else could. With her, he didn't have to hide the darker parts of himself. He didn't have to pretend to be the Jedi the Council wanted him to be. He could just be Anakin. And Ahsoka, she knew she was crossing a line she could never uncross. She wasn't supposed to feel this way. Attachment was forbidden. Desire was dangerous. But the memory of his lips, his hands pulling her close, lingered in every heartbeat. She told herself it was just a moment of weakness, but deep down she knew better. She wanted him, even if wanting him might destroy them both. One night, only a few weeks later, fate tested them again. The cruiser drifted in hyperspace, soldiers asleep in their bunks. Anakin stood alone in the hangar, staring out at the blur of stars, his mind heavy with conflict. He heard footsteps, soft and careful, and didn't need to turn to know who it was. "You couldn't sleep either." Ahsoka's voice was gentle, but the way it slid through the quiet made his chest tighten. He turned slightly, managing a strained smile. "Seems like that's becoming a habit for both of us." She walked closer, her lekku swaying, her presence a familiar warmth that tugged at him. She stopped beside him, arms folded, her gaze fixed on the streaks of hyperspace. "Every time I close my eyes, I see the faces of the men we lost today. And then, I see yours." The confession hit him harder than she could know. He exhaled slowly, forcing his hands to remain clenched at his sides. "Ahsoka, we shouldn't." She cut him off, her voice low, firm, almost daring. "Don't say it. Don't pretend you don't feel it too." The silence between them burned. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and saw the truth in her eyes. She was his student, his partner, his equal, and something far more dangerous. Anakin reached for her before he could stop himself, his hand brushing against her cheek. She leaned into it with a soft sigh, her eyes fluttering shut. "We're playing with fire," he whispered, his thumb grazing her skin. Ahsoka opened her eyes, her voice barely audible, then let it burn. The distance between them vanished. Their lips crashed together in a kiss far hotter, far more desperate than the first. Her hands clutched his tunic, pulling him closer, pressing her body against his. His arms wrapped around her waist, lifting her slightly as though he could never hold her tightly enough. The kiss deepened, hungry and reckless, both of them surrendering to the passion they had fought so hard to deny. The world outside the hangar ceased to exist. The Jedi Code, the war, even Padmé, all of it melted away in the fire of that moment. When they finally broke apart, gasping for air, Anakin rested his forehead against hers, his breath hot against her lips. "If we keep doing this, there's no turning back." Ahsoka's eyes burned with something fierce, something unshakable. "I don't want to turn back." His heart thundered in his chest. He knew she meant it. He knew he meant it too. And that terrified him more than any battle ever could. They stayed there for what felt like forever, wrapped in each other's arms, caught between duty and desire. For the first time in his life, Anakin felt truly seen, truly wanted. Not as the chosen one, not as a general, but as himself. But in the back of his mind, a shadow stirred. Padmé's face, her smile, her love, all waiting for him back on Coruscant. And now, a secret he could never share threatened to tear it all apart. The galaxy would never understand. The Council would never forgive. Padmé would never recover if she knew. But standing there with Ahsoka, her warmth pressed against him, her lips swollen from his kiss, Anakin realized something terrible. He didn't care. The war dragged on, but for Anakin and Ahsoka, battles on the front lines were no longer the only danger. Every mission, every quiet moment between skirmishes, became a chance for their secret to grow. What began as glances had turned into kisses. What began as hesitation had turned into need. Late at night, they found each other. Sometimes it was in the empty hangar, the hum of the engines masking their whispers. Sometimes it was in the quiet training room, the glow of their sabers casting shadows as they fought, until their blades fell silent and their lips found each other. It was never enough. One night, after a victory on Felucia, the celebration was loud. The clones drank, laughed, and told stories around the fire. But Anakin and Ahsoka slipped away, unnoticed, into the shadows of the jungle. The air was thick with the scent of flowers and rain. Ahsoka pressed her back against a tree, her chest heaving, her eyes bright with daring. Anakin stood close, too close, his hand braced above her shoulder, his body inches from hers. "You know we shouldn't be doing this," he whispered, though his voice was rough with desire. Ahsoka smirked, her voice low, teasing. "Then why are you here?" Before he could answer, she tugged him forward, her lips crashing into his. The kiss was wild, desperate, the kind that came from weeks of stolen moments and unsaid words. His hands gripped her waist, hers tangled in his hair, both of them lost in the fire. When they pulled apart, breathless, Ahsoka's leku brushed against his cheek. She whispered, "Tell me you don't want this and I'll stop." Anakin's jaw tightened, his heart pounding. He couldn't. He didn't. Instead, he leaned down, kissing her again, harder this time, as though to erase the doubt. For hours they stayed hidden, wrapped in each other's arms, whispering secrets they could never share with anyone else. Anakin told her how the Council never truly trusted him, how the weight of being the chosen one suffocated him. Ahsoka confessed how she sometimes questioned the Jedi path, how she longed to be more than a soldier in someone else's war. They weren't just breaking rules, they were building a bond stronger than either of them had ever known. But every secret has a cost. Back on Coruscant, Padmé had begun to notice the changes. Anakin's hollow messages were shorter, distracted. He visited her less, and when he did, his eyes seemed to drift elsewhere, as if haunted by something unsaid. She tried to tell herself it was the war, the council, the endless responsibilities. But deep down, a quiet fear gnawed at her heart. One night, after a long Senate session, she sat in her apartment, staring at the Coruscant skyline. C-3PO hovered nearby, asking if she needed anything, but she didn't answer. Her thoughts were far away, on her husband, on the distance between them, on the possibility she didn't want to admit. Meanwhile, far from Coruscant, Anakin was lost in another stolen night. In the dark of his quarters, Ahsoka leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. Their hands were intertwined, hidden beneath the folds of a blanket, as if covering their sin made it less real. "I wish it could always be like this," Ahsoka whispered, her voice soft, vulnerable in a way she rarely allowed. Anakin turned his head, brushing his lips against her temple. "So do I." But even as he said it, guilt stabbed at him. Padmé's face flashed in his mind, her smile, her touch, her faith in him. He loved her. He always would. But what he felt for Ahsoka was different. Utter. Like a flame he couldn't control. Ahsoka tilted her head up to look at him, her eyes searching his. "You're thinking about her, aren't you?" The words hit like a blaster bolt. His throat tightened. "Ahsoka." She pulled her hand from his, sitting up, her voice sharper now. "You can't have both, Anakin. Sooner or later, you'll have to choose." He stared at her, torn in two. His love for Padmé was steady, a secret foundation built on years of devotion. But his passion for Ahsoka was raw, immediate, and unstoppable. For the first time in his life, Anakin Skywalker, war hero, chosen one, Jedi Knight, was truly afraid. Not of the war, not of the Sith, but of his own heart. Every stolen night made the risk greater. Every kiss, every whisper in the dark, was another step toward a cliff they could not climb back from. And yet, Anakin and Ahsoka kept stepping forward. They couldn't stop. The war gave them excuses. Long missions, remote bases, nights spent far from Coruscant. To the clones, they were still General Skywalker and Commander Tano. Fearless leaders, inseparable warriors. But behind closed doors, when no one was watching, they became something else. One evening aboard their cruiser, the ship rattled from the jump into hyperspace. Anakin had called Ahsoka to review tactics, but the datapads lay forgotten on the table between them. She leaned back in her chair, smirking, her arms folded as she teased him. "You know, for a so-called tactical genius, you're terrible at pretending to focus." Anakin raised an eyebrow, stepping closer. "I could say the same about you, Snips." She rolled her eyes, though her smile betrayed her. "Don't call me that." "Why not?" He leaned in, his voice dropping to a husky whisper. "You like it." Her breath hitched, her smirk faltering as he closed the space between them. The datapad slid aside as he pressed his hands on the table, caging her in. Her eyes flicked to his lips, then back up, daring him. "Anakin," she whispered, but the warning melted into need. The next moment, his mouth was on hers. The kiss was fierce, hungry, months of tension erupting all at once. She tugged at his tunic, pulling him closer, while he angled her back against the chair, his hands sliding to her waist. The datapads clattered to the floor, forgotten, as the two of them drowned in fire. They broke apart only when the sound of boots echoed down the hall. Gasping, Ahsoka pushed him back, her chest heaving. Anakin turned sharply toward the door, his heart racing, the heat of their kiss still on his lips. The steps passed, fading into silence. They both exhaled, shaky, adrenaline buzzing in their veins. "That," Ahsoka started, her voice breathless, "was too close." Anakin smirked despite himself, his eyes dark with desire. "Worth it." She glared, but her lips curved in a sly grin. "You're impossible. And you're irresistible." For a moment, the danger only seemed to make it sweeter. But elsewhere in the galaxy, the walls were closing in. On Coruscant, Padmé sat in her apartment, staring at the flickering hollow of her husband. Anakin's message was short, distracted, his eyes distant. She replayed it again and again, frowning. He had smiled, but it hadn't reached his eyes. He had spoken, but his voice had been hurried, impatient. Something was wrong. She felt it in her bones. Later, when Anakin returned to the capital, Padmé embraced him, clinging to him with the relief of a wife too long apart from her love. He kissed her, held her, said all the right words, but she felt the distance in the way he lingered just a moment too long before pulling away. That night, as he slept beside her, Padmé lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She thought of his absences, of his restless eyes, of the way he always seemed to be somewhere else. Someone else. Back on the front lines, Ahsoka stood with Anakin on a cliff overlooking a battlefield, the night air cool around them. The stars glittered above, silent witnesses to their sin. She stepped closer, her hand brushing his. "What if they find out?" she whispered. He caught her hand, lacing his fingers with hers. His gaze was steady, his jaw set. "Then let them. I don't care about the council. I don't care about their rules. I only care about you." Her breath caught. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to lose herself in those words. But she knew the truth, even if he didn't say it. There was still Padmé. The galaxy was pulling Anakin Skywalker apart, between the steady love of his wife and the burning passion of his Padawan. And sooner or later, one of them would see the truth. The war had given them endless reasons to be close. Missions, battles, victories, and losses. But this time there was no excuse. No mission briefing. No tactics to review. Just Anakin and Ahsoka, alone in the quiet of his quarters, the galaxy spinning outside the viewport. The room was dim, lit only by the faint blue glow of hyperspace streaking beyond the glass. Ahsoka stood by the window, her arms crossed, her silhouette sharp against the light. Anakin lingered near the door, watching her, his chest rising and falling too fast. "You asked me here," she said softly, not turning. "But you haven't said a word." Anakin swallowed hard. His thoughts were a storm. Padmé's face, Ahsoka's lips, the Jedi code, the fire in his veins that refused to be silenced. He took a step closer. "I don't know how to stop," he admitted. His voice cracked with the weight of it. "I don't want to stop." That Ahsoka turned. Her eyes caught his, and in them was the same fire, the same hunger, the same fear. She crossed the room in 3 strides, her hand pressing against his chest. "Then don't," she whispered. The dam broke. Anakin cupped her face, his lips crashing into hers, desperate, claiming. Ahsoka's fingers curled into his tunic, pulling him closer until their bodies pressed together. No space left between them. The kiss was rough, messy, fueled by weeks of longing and the knowledge that every second was borrowed. They stumbled back toward the bed, lips never parting, their breaths sharp and hot. Anakin's hands traced the lines of her back, holding her as though he would never let go. Ahsoka tilted her head, deepening the kiss, her leku brushing against his cheek, sending sparks through his skin. When they finally pulled apart, panting, their foreheads touched. Ahsoka's voice trembled as she whispered, "We're going to destroy ourselves." "Then let it happen," Anakin rasped, his lips brushing hers again. "I can't lose you, Snips. I won't." Her eyes closed at the name, her breath shuddering. "You already belong to someone else." The words pierced him, Padmé's face flashing in his mind, her smile, her love, her trust. Guilt seared through him, but even then, even with her name spoken aloud, he couldn't stop. He kissed Ahsoka again, slower now, tender, as though trying to make sense of 2 worlds colliding. Hours slipped by, their whispers and laughter filling the dark. They spoke of the future, of what life might be like if there were no council, no war, no rules. They dreamed of freedom, of choosing each other openly, of a galaxy where love was not forbidden. But the dream was fragile, built on lies and shadows, because on Coruscant Padmé was waiting, and she was not blind. That night, as Anakin held Ahsoka in his arms, Padmé sat alone in her apartment, staring out at the endless city. Her heart was heavy, her thoughts circling the man she loved more than life itself. She pressed a hand to her stomach, whispering to the child growing within her, a secret she hadn't yet shared with him. And though she tried to push it aside, one truth gnawed at her, sharp and relentless. Anakin was slipping away. The Force whispered it. Her heart screamed it. And soon she would learn why. Padmé Amidala was not naive. She had spent her life among senators and politicians, people who wore lies like fine clothing. She had learned to read the smallest gestures, the quiet cracks in a voice, the glance that lingered too long. And Anakin Skywalker, her husband, her love, the man she had risked everything for, was beginning to wear those same cracks. He came home late, sometimes not at all. When she asked about the war, his answers were rushed, distracted. He kissed her, but his eyes were far away. And when he held her, she felt the space between them like a chasm. One evening, Padmé stood before the mirror in her apartment, brushing her hair, when her comlink beeped. She picked it up, expecting a Senate aide. But the message was from a clone officer stationed with Anakin. It was short, routine, but it contained words that twisted her stomach. General Skywalker was last seen in the company of Commander Tano. Padmé's brush slipped from her hand, clattering to the floor. Ahsoka. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. She tried to dismiss it, to tell herself she was being foolish. Ahsoka was his Padawan, his student, his responsibility. But the thought wouldn't leave her. The way Anakin's eyes had grown distant, the way he avoided her questions, the way he seemed divided. She needed to know. Days later, when Anakin returned from a mission, Padmé watched him carefully. He smiled, kissed her cheek, spoke of duty and battle, but she saw the shadow behind his eyes. That night, while he slept beside her, she rose quietly and slipped from their bed. He searched, and in time she found. It was late when she followed him to the temple, cloaked and silent. She kept to the shadows as he moved through the halls, her heart racing with every step. Anakin walked quickly, glancing behind him once, twice, as though carrying a secret too heavy to bear. Padmé's stomach turned when she saw where he was going. Not to the council, not to his quarters, but to Ahsoka. She hid in the shadows as the door slid open. Her breath caught as she saw them. Anakin stepping inside, Ahsoka waiting, their eyes meeting with a fire that burned too brightly to be mere friendship. He reached for her hand, and she didn't pull away. Padmé's world cracked. She covered her mouth to stifle a cry, her knees trembling, her heart screaming in her chest. The truth was undeniable, laid bare before her eyes. Anakin, her husband, her love, the father of her unborn child, was holding someone else. Not just anyone. Ahsoka. Her heart broke. She stumbled back, pressing against the wall, tears spilling down her cheeks. She had faced war, assassins, betrayal in the Senate itself, but nothing had ever cut her so deeply. Inside, Anakin brushed his fingers against Ahsoka's cheek, whispering words Padmé could not hear. Ahsoka leaned into his touch, her eyes soft, her lips parting in a smile meant only for him. Padmé turned away, unable to watch. Her chest ached as though it would shatter entirely. Quietly, she fled into the night, her tears lost in the endless lights of Coruscant. When Anakin returned to her hours later, she was waiting. Her face was pale, her eyes red but steady. He greeted her as though nothing was wrong, but when she turned to him, her voice was cold as stone. "Anakin," she said softly, "who is she to you?" The words cut deeper than any lightsaber. His mouth opened, but no sound came. Guilt flashed across his face, and in that instant Padmé knew the truth, even if he never spoke it. A tear slid down her cheek. Her voice broke as she whispered, "You promised me. You swore you loved me." "I do," Anakin said hoarsely, stepping toward her. But Padmé stepped back. "Not enough," she whispered. And with that, the galaxy between them widened into an abyss. Padmé Amidala had faced war, betrayal, and death, but nothing compared to the pain of watching her husband's love slip through her fingers. The night she saw him with Ahsoka, the world she had built cracked like glass. But Padmé was no stranger to strength. She would not let the truth rot inside her. She deserved answers. And so, when the time came, she confronted them both. It happened on Coruscant, in the quiet of Padmé's apartment. She had asked Anakin to come, her voice steady though her hands trembled. When he arrived, his eyes softened at the sight of her, but she did not smile. She stood tall, every inch the senator, every inch the woman who had once defied a queen and a warlord alike. "Sit down," she told him. Anakin frowned, sensing the tension in her voice. But he obeyed, lowering himself into a chair as she remained standing, her arms folded. "You've been lying to me," Padmé began. He froze, his throat tight. "Padmé, don't." Her voice cracked like a whip. "Don't you dare insult me with another excuse. I know Anakin. I know about Ahsoka." The silence that followed was suffocating. Anakin's jaw clenched, his hands curling into fists. For a moment he thought to deny it, but the look in her eyes stopped him. She had seen. Before he could form a word, the door hissed open. And there, caught in the trap of fate, stood Ahsoka. She froze at the sight of Padmé, her eyes widening, her breath catching. The room grew heavy with silence. 3 lives tangled in a web of lies and love. Padmé's gaze turned to her, sharp as a blade. "How long?" Ahsoka swallowed hard, shame burning in her chest. "Padmé, how long?" Padmé demanded, her voice shaking, her tears finally breaking free. Anakin rose, stepping between them, his hands outstretched. "Stop, both of you, please." But the storm had already broken. "You swore you loved me," Padmé whispered, her voice breaking. "That I was the one thing you couldn't live without. Was that all a lie?" "No," Anakin shouted, his voice raw. He turned to her, desperation in his eyes. "I love you, Padmé, more than anything. But His voice faltered as his gaze flicked to Ahsoka, whose eyes were brimming with unshed tears. "I couldn't stop myself." The words shattered Padmé's heart. She pressed a hand to her chest, as though trying to hold it together. "You betrayed me," she whispered. Ahsoka stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Padmé, I never wanted to hurt you. I swear it. But Anakin and I..." "Don't," Padmé hissed, her eyes flashing. "Don't speak to me of love when all you've done is tear mine apart." Ahsoka's words died in her throat. Anakin moved toward Padmé, reaching for her hand, but she pulled away, her tears falling freely now. "I don't even know who you are anymore." Her words sliced deeper than any lightsaber. For a moment, the 3 of them stood in silence, the weight of broken promises filling the air. Anakin's chest heaved, his emotions swirling into a storm. He wanted to hold Padmé, to kiss away her tears, to beg for forgiveness, but he also wanted to turn to Ahsoka, to cling to the fire that burned between them. He was split in 2, and the galaxy itself seemed to tremble at the fracture. Padmé straightened, her sorrow hardening into steel. "I can't do this anymore, Anakin. Not like this. You made your choice the moment you touched her." Her words left no room for argument. She turned away, her shoulders stiff, her heart shattering with each step. Ahsoka lowered her head, guilt and longing battling inside her. She wanted to reach out, to say something, anything, but the words refused to come. Anakin stood in the middle, caught between the wreckage of the woman he had sworn to love forever, and the fire of the one he could not let go. For the first time, he felt the full weight of his choices, and the cracks that had begun in his heart spread outward, threatening to break not only his marriage, not only his bond with Ahsoka, but perhaps the very fate of the galaxy.